Thank you for joining us, Professor Aliyu Jauro. We appreciate you. Thank you for joining us on Daybreak.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm sure that while waiting, you've watched the story about the flood situation in Nasarawa State. We understand that about at least 43,000 people have been affected by this flooding from the beginning of the year till this moment, particularly in the northeastern part of the country. I would like to know what's the response of your agency as regards these flooding incidents in recent times?
Well, the response of the National Environmental Standards and Regulation Enforcement Agency is, first of all, what we always engage in is to sensitize the general public on what they need to do in order to have preventive measures. Because when you look at the causes of this flooding, most of them are man-made. So we try to avoid some of these factors that causes this flooding. We are going to save a lot of lives and properties from being lost. One of our major problems, if you look at it, we don't have adequate drainage systems. Most cities, especially, well, cities, some of them have some level of drainages. But if you go to our rural areas, there's nothing like any form of drainage. They just rely on the natural ones. Secondly, the issue of the waste management. We do just dump our waste anyhow, thereby blocking our drainages. So whenever there's any torrential rain, it's very hard for this rain to find a way out. So we end up having these issues of flooding. So annually we go out to sensitize the general public. Our state offices currently are doing that all over. Secondly, we engage with regular stakeholders to brainstorm and find ways out of this flooding incidents. We work together with agencies like NIMET, NEMA, and other agencies. We always come together. And thirdly, we have a regulatory framework. We have the National Environmental Soil Erosion and Flood Control Regulations. So there are specific guidelines there. So we always go out to regulate the activities of individuals and corporate bodies in order to control this issue of flooding. So in that regulation I'm talking about, it is put in place in order to minimize losses that will occur due to either soil erosion or flooding, and the regulation is meant also to safeguard the human health and the environment. And also it is meant also to minimize all land disturbing activities that would end up dumping a lot of sandy and silty materials into water bodies, thereby polluting the water bodies. So we go out to ensure that people comply. So apart from that, we also have other regulations that are also tailored towards controlling this issue of flooding. For instance, we have a National Environmental Construction Sector Regulations. You know, construction sector is one of the sectors also that contribute to some of these issues of flooding. Mm-hmm. Some people will just go and erect a building on the floodplains or any flood area. So when it rains, certainly most of this rainwater is going to have an impact. So we also have all these provisions. When you are going to embark on this construction, there's need for you to make adequate provision for storm water that may arise due to this construction. You must abide by all the building guides, codes and guidelines, that is by getting the necessary approvals and all other things. So these are a few of the regulations. We have other forms of regulations that even protect some of this marine environment.
Okay.
rivers, lake shores, all of this type of settings. We have regulations that are tailored towards protecting them.
Okay, one key thing which is your agency is directly responsible is the issue of industrial pollutants. To what extent are the byproducts or even activities of industries contributes in contaminating the environment, especially factors that aid issues like flooding and others?
Well, if you talk about industries, we have different types of industries, and the type of impact that is generated depends on the activity of the industry. So if you talk about chemical industries, certainly when they carry out their processes, one of the byproducts they may generate may impact on the air quality.
I'm talking of things like polythene, for example, which is a lot of times it's mentioned when we are discussing things like like flooding and others.
Okay, so when it comes to that, you are talking about issue of plastics.
Yes.
Yes, this is a worldwide issue because these plastics now, we know that they don't just degrade easily. So when you litter it anyhow, when it rains, so rainwater will just carry most of this. These are some of the wastes I'm talking about. So when it washes them, it's one of the major issues we are having. So it ends up blocking our drainages. So one of the things we are working on now is the adoption of the circular economy. So how do we go about this circular economy? Presently, we are implementing what we call the extended producer responsibility. Whoever generates any form of material is saddled with the responsibility of taking it out of the environment and recycling it. So it's part of the polluter pays principle. So they're expected to make provision. If you produce any plastic material, you should set aside some amount of money so that when this material comes to its end of life, so it will be taken out of the environment and recycled. So the type of EPR we're implementing presently in Nigeria is industry driven. So already they have come together to form what we call the Producer Responsibility Organization, the PROs. So for the one dealing with plastics, certainly we know the industries that generate these plastics, that uses them. We have the food and beverages sector. So when we talk about the food and beverages sector, are those sectors that produce some of these soft drinks, the bottled water we drink. So daily, if you look at it, people use some of these materials. So how do we take care of this? So they have come together to form what we call Food and Beverages Recycling Alliance. So these food and beverages recyclers have this PRO, and the PRO is a third party that is saddled with the responsibility of managing the issue of collection of this waste and also recycling. So the industries are expected to fund the activities of the PRO. So when we do that, the issue of plastic waste is going to be solved. And presently, you know, if you go around, you see scavengers in the morning going around picking some of these plastic bottles. So already we have started.
And I mean, talking about scavengers, that in itself, it's been engrossed in some kind of controversy in recent times. The Nigerian police and the FCT administration, for instance, in the FCT, have raised, concerns about suspicion and on security threats as a result of the activities of scavengers. In fact, there's a ban on the activities of scavengers in the FCT and all of that. So how is that, affecting, what we need to do as far as safeguarding the environment?
In fact, that's one of the main roles of the PRO, the Producer Responsibility Organization. So they manage the issue of collection and recyclers. So part of their roles is to formalize the issue of collection. So those people we call scavengers. We look at them as miscreants. So they are going to be trained and equipped with all necessary tools. They need to have the personal protective equipment, dress well, and have all the necessary backing. They should have like ID card. They are going to be registered so that it will be recognized. Likewise, the PRO is going to provide some support, financial support, to some of these collectors. So they are going to subsidize the issue of this collection. So when it is gathered, they also take it to the recyclers. Likewise, they are going to provide some funding for the recycler in order to recycle some of this plastic waste.
Beyond, and the world is somehow moving away from recycling to encouraging biodegradable containers. We seems to be lagging behind. What are we doing about that?
Well, I don't think we are lagging behind, but the implementation, it goes in stages. If you listen to news, some countries have already banned the use of single-use plastics. Single-use plastics are the plastics you use and dump. So they have already outlawed that. So even in Nigeria, there was a lot of moves in proposing to ban this single-use plastics instantly. Well, you cannot just ban the usage without making provision. So there are a lot of provisions on ground, and there's a date that is set when this single-use plastics will be banned. If I've not forgotten, I think it's by there 2030 we are going to ban the use of this single plastics.
But do you think we are ready for that in Nigeria?
Well, I think we are ready, because by then I believe we must have come up with...
This is 8 years away.
Yes, it's possible. Some have achieved that within a very short time. So I think it's feasible.
Okay. All right. So to what extent would you say that urban expansion is affecting the efforts of your agency in making sure that we have a sane environment? We've had, cases of compromise by urban planners where people are allocated lands where they shouldn't be, issues of corruption in the service and all that. How is that impacting on your own efforts?
It's really a serious challenge. As you have said, Nigeria is a population of 217 million. And we know there's always an influx of migrants into the urban areas. They always migrate. So certainly we have this issue of expansion. So this expansion is really a very, very big challenge. For instance, farmlands are taken over where buildings are erected. When these buildings are erected, most of us are in the habit of using concrete on the surfaces. If you go out, you see everywhere is concrete. So as related to what we are discussing, flooding. So when it rains, the water will not find adequate place to percolate if it wants to do that. So it's one of the factors leading to flooding. Likewise, with this expansion, there is an increase in the waste generation. And our waste management policy is not good enough. So when this huge amount of waste is generated, it becomes a problem. When it rains, as I've mentioned, the rain will carry it and dump it in our drainages. When it does that, and these issues are also associated with a lot of epidemics like cholera, and we know when the water is trapped, it becomes a breeding ground for mosquitoes. So we have a lot of issues like malaria, we have like typhoid fever and other things. So it's a big challenge, and as you have said, there are a lot of compromise. You find out that there's an adequate and well-developed plant, but at the end of the day, people will not abide by it. They find their way, one way or the other, in order to expand either their building beyond the actual plan. So when they do that, it affects a lot of things. For instance, somebody may just go and build on the waterway, and the regulatory body responsible may just look the other way. So we can rule out the issue of corruption. If you don't insist on doing the right thing, certainly we are going to continue facing some of these problems.
Okay. Let's talk about air pollution. Only this morning, there are reports from the Lagos Environmental Protection Agency saying that 30,000 people die of air pollution. To what extent is this air pollution affecting the health of Nigerians?
It's a serious issue. You know, a clean air is good for healthy living, not only we human beings, our plants and animals. So if you look at it, the activities of human beings have impacted seriously on the environment. We use motor vehicles, we use generators to generate power. So we burn these fossil fuels. When we burn them, we release a lot of pollutants, ranging from sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, and most of these pollutants, when they go up, they combine together to form some of these particulate matters, and we inhale them. Some of them, when you inhale, they go deep down into your lungs. As a result of that, some of them may even have some of these hydrocarbons that are carcinogenic, some of these aromatic hydrocarbons, and when they are inhaled, they cause a lot of health problems, cancers, a lot of respiratory diseases. So I agree with the report from Lagos. Maybe even 30,000 is underestimation, because, you know, in Nigeria we don't have a strong means of data collection and analysis, and not everybody goes to the hospital. So it's a serious problem if you don't address the issue of...
So what is Nigeria doing about it?
We are doing a lot. For instance, I just mentioned one source of air pollution when I mentioned the transport sector and also the power sector. I just mentioned generators. So apart from that, we have industries I've mentioned that indulge in the production processes, and they also use generators to generate their power. So they release a lot of pollutants into the atmosphere. So we regulate their activities. Presently, we have 35 environmental regulations. So about 9 of these regulations are on these industries. So we go to ensure that they do the right thing. We issue out what we call permit, air quality and waste and toxic substance permit, because we go and check what they do, and we always require them to apply it for that, so that we ensure that what they release into the environment is within the allowed limits. There are limits to which, for instance, if your process is a wet process, at the end of the day, you are going to have a waste liquid. So before you discharge this liquid into the environment, you are expected to treat it, to remove all the hazardous components. So it's not possible to remove everything 100%. So there's a specific limit to which you are expected to reduce the concentration of these hazardous components before you release the water into the environment. So we monitor the activities. And for the transport sector, we are currently working on a program which we call National Vehicular Emission Control Program, where all vehicles will be subjected to annual testing. There is a standard, so we compare with the standard to ensure that they are emitting within that standard. If they are not, the owner of the vehicle will be given a certain amount of time to go and fix his vehicle. So likewise, we have another program, the National Generator Emission Control Program also, which is tailored towards controlling the emission emanating from these generators. So all these programs on ground in order to ensure that we have air quality. And there is also a regulation that prohibits open burning. Open burning is one of a serious contributor to a poor air quality. We are in the habit of gathering our refuse, setting it on fire. So this is one of the major problems. When you burn, you add a lot of pollutants into the atmosphere. Not only those that are good enough, some of them are even carcinogenic because you burn some plastics. When they burn, they generate organic substance, like what we call the furans and dioxins, and they are serious carcinogens. And we end up inhaling them. So we need to do a lot in order to secure the environment.
All right. All right then. So we'll take a short breather now, and then while we are doing that, we'll take a report from Kaduna, talking about flooding again in Kaduna State. And then when we return, the discussion on the program will continue. Please stay with us.
Every patriotic Nigerian should hear this. Any politician who means well for the people will never allow themselves or their supporters to engage in any violent, destructive activities. No politician who truly wants to serve the people and develop the nation will encourage his followers to destroy properties or take human lives before, during, or after the elections. The Nigerian public must watch out for these traits and isolate any politician who encourages supporters to engage in violence. No genuine politician or patriot will cause trouble and seek to destroy the very society which they aspire to lead or develop. Politicians who have the good of the people at heart will not allow themselves or their followers to engage in violence, destruction of properties, and then taking of lives. Be vigilant. By their words you shall know them. Shun violence. Stay away from politicians who want you to do so. Let's join hands to make the 2023 elections peaceful. This message is from the National Orientation Agency, NORA.
This cemetery is about 4 decades old. A resident of Fine Territory community buried their loved ones here. In recent times, inhabitants of the area are experiencing worrying development as decomposing human parts are often seen in the ditch and had to be buried again by the community. The erosion created holes in the graves, and the water flushed out the corpses from the graves. Many corpses were flushed out by the water. From here, you can see some holes with corpses inside. We hardly sleep when it is raining because the water submerges our houses and also the cemetery. The cemetery lies between two parts of High Territorial community situated on a hilly landscape. The erosion is created by waterway that flows from the community to its base where the cemetery is located and gradually expanded into drainage. Despite several community efforts, the erosion persists. We forwarded our complaints to the local government chairman. He was here and said the situation But up till this moment, nothing has been done to curb the problem. The Igabi local government chairman Jauro says the whole area is at risk, including the cemetery. He said last year he led a team from the Federal Ministry of Environment to inspect such affected areas within the local government, adding that erosion control is responsibility of the federal government.
Crops, flooding the water, there's no problem. Maybe there will, one or two, you will see a bond and other things, but not a complete crops. We're doing all the necessary arrangement to see that we overcome this issue. But you have to know one thing, the control of the erosion is a federal government issue. But thank God, it is yesterday because of this territorial cemetery erosion, I had that. We got the ecological fund from the federal government, and by inshallah, we are going to share it within the local government of the state. But they are waiting for the plan, that is how to spend the money.
One of the major challenges facing the Rigasa community is erosion. Beside Toro Cemetery, a cemetery at Laimbilia in the same Rigasa community is also affected by a gully erosion. Bella Musa, Trust TV News, Kaduna.
Well, that reports from Kaduna State, adds to the conversation we are having regarding the environment, safety of the environment, and what to do about it. And we've been discussing in the studio here with the Director General, Chief Executive Officer of the National Environmental Standards and Regulations Enforcement Agency, NESREA, Professor Aliyu Jauro. Thank you for staying with us, Prof. Now, you've seen this issue of erosion in Kaduna. What are the, environmental hazards that long-term erosion causes in the long run?
Well, we have seen what happened in Rigasa community. Even the dead ones are not spared. It has already eroded the cemetery, exposing the degraded dead bodies. So these are some of the effects. So it's not only the cemetery that is affected, the farmlands. The erosion will come and clear the plantations. And when it does that, it goes away with the topsoil. The topsoil is the soil that contains the nutrients. So even after this flooding, for instance, next year, when they plant, they are not going to get any significant yield because the nutrients have gone. Likewise, it washes the houses when it rains a lot. So means of livelihood will also be lost, including the human lives and animals. So it's a serious issue. If nothing is done about it, we are not going to achieve most of these sustainable development goals, because about 9 of the 8 SDGs are impacted by this flooding. We are talking about zero hunger, poverty eradication, clean water and sanitation, for example. If you look at them, you cannot achieve them with this issue of flooding. When you have floods, as I've mentioned, it clears all the farmlands, the croppings, so you are not going to eradicate poverty, especially in that very community. Not only that community. For instance, most of the food we consume in Nigeria are those that are produced by the subsistence farmers. Those little clay farmers we see in villages cultivating their land, they contribute a lot. So with this level of flooding, they will lose their farmlands, so will not get adequate yield. Livelihoods are lost, lives and properties. So you cannot be able to even quantify the amount of losses associated with this.
Okay, did you come back to you? If you hold on a bit, I want to reconnect with Dr. Ahir Mohammed from Kano, an environmentalist who is championing clean environment campaign in Kano. Good morning, Dr. Jauro, and thank you for joining us this morning.
Abdulaziz.
Okay, so quickly, we've been witnessing flood all over the country, especially even in Kano where you are. You know, there have been reports of flood, including around markets and residential areas. What's the cause of this increasing or heightening incidences of flood?
Well, Mala Abdulaziz, I think in the very first place there is a need for us as a community to understand that this flooding is a worst natural disaster we are having alongside earthquake. You see, there are different types of flooding, of course, but here in Kano, it's mostly due to poor urban planning. You find people building on waterways, and then you find, apart from building on waterways, you find people dumping refuse whenever there is rainfall and all of that. But in the same time, there is another global issue, which is more about the earth getting warmer. You know, when the earth is warmer, the air tends to hold more
It's a
humidity.
young man and he's...
Rainfalls come in a very large amount. And then there is this another issue of rising sea levels. But in Kano, in Kano at this time, I think more of what we're having is due to this poor urban planning.
All right. Okay, so at your own, based on what you have observed in Kano, what are you doing to sensitize the people? Yes, we understand the issue of, poor urban planning and also the issue of waste management as big issues. So it means that there is need for more sensitization. There is need for more awareness to be created. What kind of engagements do you have with, the communities that you interface with?
Well, as usual, we always try to create this awareness and then sensitize the community on the effect of this flooding, considering that it is of people. And then at the same time, we have very little to do at our level. Since when we look at the cause, we will see that mostly due to greed and corruption, because there is no way someone will just come and build on waterways. And from our own part, we are trying to enlighten the community to observe, to realize that it's a cumulative effort for us to build a better society. There is no point someone will just pick up, refuse and just drop them anywhere that person likes, and those refuse will lead to the blockage of waterways. And at the same time, we are championing the tree planting campaign in Kano. Currently, this rainy season, we are planting 100,000 trees in partnership with the Federal Ministry of Environment. And the reason why we are planting that is in order to improve the air quality and cooling effect. This excessive heat is what leads to this rise in temperature, high humidity in the air, as I said earlier. And then even when you look at it globally, whenever there is this excessive heat, it tends to the expansion of water molecules. And once there is that expansion, it leads to the increase of the air quantity. And there is this issue of melting ice sheet. And this is not something we in Kano are going to do alone. I think this is something that, although the issue is a global challenge, but it needs to be addressed through, national approach. So this is what we are doing in Kano, creating the awareness and then doing our own part. But the government has to do more because it has to do with policy making, it has to do with regulation, it has to do with ensuring that people are living within law and order.
Okay, you mentioned the global dimension of this problem, and of course the United Nations Convention on climate change. This COP conference is coming on in a few weeks from now. And to what extent do you think the world is really serious and committed, especially the big countries that are the highest emitters of this dangerous gaseous substance, are to having a safer climate, or a safer earth generally?
You see, even during the Eastwell Climate Summit in Paris, I think the sole issue why they initiated that is because there is this issue of rising temperature, and the thing is not that the earth is getting warmer, but it started getting warmer too fast. So honestly, countries were tasked to offer their own, maybe ambitious target, but a lot of these biggest polluters in the world have failed to do that. Today, you find out that even, let's say, during the administration of Trump, you find out that USA are moving out of this agreement. Tomorrow, you heard that Chinese are not doing their own part, and these countries are the biggest polluters we are having. So they are the one that needs to do more. And there is always the issue of funding, although this funding issue doesn't even comes to places like ours, but because the government are not even trying to tap into these opportunities. And I think if we can come up with good proposals, like earlier in your discussion, I had the issue of how we can cut down carbon emissions. We look at our population, for example, here in Kano, we look at the rate we're emitting CO2. All of these are mostly, man-made issues. So if we can come up with proposal, and then maybe the climate initiative, I think we can be able to do more than what we are doing now.
All right, thank you, Dr. Dahir Muhammad, for your thoughts, for joining us on Daybreak and sharing your perspectives. Dahir Muhammad is an environmentalist and climate change expert. Thank you. We appreciate you for joining us on Daybreak.
Yeah, you're much welcome.
All right. So let's get back to Professor Aliyu Jauro here in the studio. Well, you've heard what he has said. I recall that in the last COP26 meeting, the president made a promise to how that Nigeria is committed to net zero emissions by 2060 and all of that. And there are some experts who have said that, well, what's on ground for us to realize that? I mean, how realistic is that, for us to achieve and all of that? So what are we doing as regards realizing that?
I think Nigeria is on course. Recently, the Climate Change Commission was established by Mr. President, and the director was appointed. And even last week, the Honorable Minister of Environment flagged off the carbon trading scheme, which is one of the robust mechanisms to allow us as a nation to achieve this net zero. It has to do with the trading of the emission that is well established in other developed countries, which encourages industries to cut down their emissions so that they gain a lot. So you can trade out, you take a target and see if you cut it down, and you can trade it, you get a lot of money. And likewise, Nigeria is going to embark on massive tree planting. Now, when you plant to these trees, those that will serve as a carbon sink, they absorb the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And this carbon dioxide is one of the major culprits contributing to the global.
It appears that we have, other challenges that we are dealing with. Recently, we've seen some kind of energy crisis in Nigeria, and especially if you look at the price of cooking gas, for instance. It's on the high, hitting the skies, and people are now considering their options, going back to use of charcoal. How is that going to impact on the efforts that we are making in this regard?
In fact, it's a serious issue. If we don't address the issue of clean cooking fuel, it's going to be very difficult for us to achieve the net zero, as you have said, because people will go and continue cutting down these trees, not only to produce the charcoal. Some use the wood as firewood. You go to our rural areas, there's nothing like cooking gas. Unless we look at this issue and address it, make provision and subsidize it, really is going to be very, very difficult for us to achieve. But you know, the major challenge is presently this cooking gas is most of it is even imported into the country. So there is need for us to double our effort and ensure that this cooking gas is produced locally and is subsidized so that people can afford, in order to look away from the other sources, as you have said, the charcoal and the firewood.
So, you know, this energy transition also is not cheap, you know, for developing countries like Nigeria. I'm aware of the climate finance support. Is Nigeria, you know, benefiting from that at the moment?
We are not benefiting much for now, because there are a lot of requirements that we need to fulfill. Well, I think we are strategizing to see how we can access some of these funds in order to address these issues. You know, before you get these funds, you need to generate a lot of data. You have to justify that you need them before you get them. But I believe we are working towards that, especially with the establishment of the Climate Change Commission. And in the Federal Ministry of Environment, we have a department for this, for the climate change. And with the launching of the carbon trading, so we are coming to that by God's grace. Not, it wouldn't take us a long time before we achieve that.
Okay, the organic cleanup has been going on for years, and then there is a surge in activities of oil bunkers and people breaking, you know, pipelines, stealing oil and all that. How is that like? Is that rolling back the perhaps what government intend to achieve with the organic cleanup?
Well, the issue of organic cleanup is not within the purview of my agency.
What I'm talking
Yes.
about is the fact that government is doing this cleanup of the environment, and then so to what extent is the ongoing activities of oil bunkering and all that affects the environment in the Niger Delta? Let me rephrase it.
I don't think with the activities of these bunkerers, we are going to solve this issue of oil pollution, provided they are going to break the pipelines and they will cut away some volume of this crude oil. And before they do that, most of this crude oil will gush out. And also some of them, even after collection, they're in the habit of even, they will just leave it like that. So even if we clean and you release, so we are not going to solve this issue of the oil pollution, as you have said. The only solution is for them to understand that this environment belongs to them. If they continue to pollute it, there's no way they can have a place to continue to live. And also, we need, as a nation, our security apparatus, they must be up and doing in order to prevent this issue of oil bunkering. Well, we know the challenges. The Niger Delta militants, some of them are even more armed than our security agencies. Likewise, we cannot shun away from issue of corruption. There are a lot of reports saying that some of these security agencies are also involved in this issue of oil bunkering. So we need to sit down and look at the issues holistically for us to save this environment.
All right, so finally, before we leave, I would like to throw this to you. What's your assessment of the response to early warnings by NIMET, you know, from the community, from the, you know, local communities in terms of communication and then their responses? You know, what do we need to do?
And state governments as well.
Yes. There seems to be a breach somewhere.
Yes, I don't think the response is good enough. You know our attitude here, even if you send early warning, most people will be adamant. Leave this place, there's a possibility of floods coming. So most people may not leave. So unless the authorities enforce, in some states, they usually carry out an enforcement. Whenever there's an early warning, you send our security officers to forcibly evacuate people, take them to a higher ground. So that is the only solution. I know I read about this Ogun State, they used to do that. So unless you do that, people will not leave the place. Likewise, even some of our subnationals are not serious enough when they receive such early warnings. They don't act. So there's need for us to change the way we do things. As soon as you receive these early warnings, you take the necessary measures. Tell the communities to leave. If they're not ready to leave, forcibly eject them. You have the right to do so. It's your responsibility to protect their lives and properties.
All right.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Aliyu Jauro, who's been with us discussing the issue of challenges of managing the environment, and especially in the face of flood that has been witnessed all over the country, and especially in some northern states.